Oh, this is fun. Hey guys, have you ever worked with business lines of credit? My broker says I need to have it liquidated into cash to have in a bank account to show lenders how to liquidate business credit cards. And then the follow up of that is I thought I would just need to write a check to my title company.
So it looks like your broker or your realtor is asking you to have proof of funds. So if your bank can give you a proof of funds letter for that line of credit, then you wouldn't have to liquidate it. But if you've got business credit cards, then that could be different. So I don't know if you're going to get a bank to say that you've got cash ready to go in your credit card account. Yeah, they might, but it sounds like what your broker really needs is just a proof of funds letter.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would, I'm sure you do. I just don't see it here. I would be very leery about like maxing out credit cards or using lines of credits to acquire properties without a really solid exit plan and a way to sustain yourself in the interim. So I would really, really want to make sure that you've got an appropriate reserve set aside. So whenever anything needs done on the property or whenever things come up that are very unexpected, you've got the means to pay for that. And then I would also really want to see that you've got an exit strategy to turn that into long term debt. One of the things that one of our business coaches told us is lines of credit are short term debt that you should use as working capital or to acquire short term assets. And when he said short term assets, just to clarify, he wasn't even talking about our business model. He was just talking about like inventory, things that you have to sell. He said that you should not use short term debt to acquire long term assets. And um, I think if you were to look back at when 2008 happened, I saw a chart the other day that showed like the changes in mortgages um, versus like the changes in HELOCs, and HELOCs were the ones that were hit the hardest. Mortgages were very little impacted from that chart. That I wouldn't even know how to find it again if I wanted to. But I would say just in talking to all the people who lost significant sums of money in that last correction, it was one of the first things to go was their lines of credit. Um, so I would just be very careful as to how you utilize those funds, and I would be crystal clear on both your reserves and your exit strategy.
Yeah. And Ryan and I, we've got a credit card just through our local credit union that is pretty much same as cash, meaning that we can take our entire credit card balance and shift it over to our checking account if we wanted to. And it's only 8%, so it's awesome.
Yeah, local credit unions are really handy for that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I plan on using the business line of credit for a BRRRR 6 months tops. That's tough. Do your research, 17th Love. Make sure that you've got on the back end a bank that only requires 6 months or less of seasoning. I think a lot of people get trapped in this BRRRR model um, because they think that they can just refinance whenever the property is rented out, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I think Will, you've got some opinions on this because you're hands on with the bank, but you do your best not to send the properties their way that don't have at least 6 months seasoning, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I won't really ask a bank to refinance a property if we've owned it for less than 6 months. The one lender that we've got a couple $1 million with right now, they might be flexible enough to entertain something like that if we averaged it in with all the other houses, some of which we've owned close to a year. So it kind of all averages out. But most banks have at least a 6 month seasoning requirement. And when COVID hit last year, some of them even hiked that up to 18 months.
Hmm.
So I just ask you, are you going to be okay if it takes 10 months or 12 to refinance this house instead of 6?
Yeah, and I made a video about why Burr is nonsense. And really, my main point of that video is, let's look at all of the ways that you can interact with real estate investing. You can buy properties, you can renovate them, you can refinance them, you can rent them, and then what else can you do? You can sell it, and then you can live in it. Am I missing anything on these?
You can let it sit vacant.
Yeah, you can let it rot. That's yeah. So, the only thing that this quote unquote strategy did was like repackage real estate investing. So, I mean, it's just a different way of saying buy and hold. The only thing in addition that it does is put an unrealistic time frame on the process. So, I mean, if you talk to any real estate investor that's been in the buy and hold sector for any time, then they have done this BRRRR strategy. It's like somebody tried to rebrand water. It's quite the stunt. So, letting it sit vacant is my current business model. That's a good one. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm leery of that. And the whole time frame. It's so far outside of the investors' control. I mean, the contractors, they finish when they finish. The banks, they refinance the property when they want to refinance the property. It's we at one point. So I need to do a better job at making videos about the mistakes that Will and I have made, because I think a lot of people only hit the highlights. Now, part of that is because most people only click on the highlights, and then other parts of that are because talking about your mistakes is just super embarrassing. And it's really easy to be like a Monday morning quarterback and say, wow, it would have been very easy to avoid that mistake. Silly person. So there's a certain level of transparency and vulnerability that I'm not always comfortable with on some of the mistakes that we've made. But one of the reasons that I'm so outspoken against trying to do that strategy is because one of the biggest mistakes that we have made, that's not true. It's not one of the biggest, but one of the ones that were just a real oopsies is we took on a couple of private loans that had a one year balloon. And sure, we bought the property, we rehabbed the property, and we got it rented out in that time frame, way less than that time frame. But it took us a really long time after that for the banks to refinance it, and it had everything to do with seasoning. And Will was working as hard as he could to find lenders willing to work with us, but it's just out of your control, and you don't really know. So that's why we're definitely saying make sure that the bank is crystal clear on your strategy.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that private lender was willing to extend the loan on our behalf, so we just signed an extension. But
and one of the banks told me they would work with a 6-month seasoning requirement, but then it took them 4 months to close the refinance.
Yeah.
So,
thanks, Norris Stocks. I appreciate you. Yes, yeah, School of Hard Knocks is. And I think if this were like an actual classroom of people, not recorded forever indefinitely to be repeated by anyone, then we would probably be a lot more vocal and transparent. But hey, I'm working up towards it. It's definitely something I need to consider. Does my broker have a better ability of finding a bank that doesn't require 6 months seasoning? I'm under the impression that the pro broker must have got cut off. Yeah. I wonder if this has like a maximum number of letters you can type in.
Yeah, so
pretty frequently.
Sounds like 17th Love is working with maybe a mortgage broker to find a bank, and it would depend on what type of a broker your mortgage broker is. Like if they only work with the Fannie and Freddie type people, because they're going to require at least 6 months. The 6-month thing is to where you can use the new appraised value, so of the property, meaning that if you try to refinance out before the 6 months, then you have to go off of the purchase price as the value, which would pretty much mess up any investor with the same strategy that we've got of buying a house, fixing it up, and then using that new repair value to get your money back when you refinance it. So,
and I would also say that, I mean, we're a huge fan of having a team. We're a huge fan of working with other people and professionals, but there are some things that you shouldn't like blindly outsource or rely on someone else, especially in some of these roles. And I know, a lot of these roles are like on a commission basis, and I know that not everybody becomes crooked just to get additional uh, commission, and that's not what I'm saying. But so much of this real estate process requires an extraordinary amount of time, and being on a commission basis, it's always really hard to put in a lot of time on someone else's behalf and then the deal fall through. So time is limited, and your exit strategy shouldn't be something that you kind of put in the hands of someone else. So just be really careful and make sure that you are hands on some really key areas of the deal. I would say for the most part, the underwriting of the deal. So making sure that you have a firm understanding of the purchase price, of the scope of work, and the after repair value is really important. And then the financing piece. Those are all really important that you should be very hands on during. 17th Love, yes, a commercial broker. I chose a broker instead of a lender company because I'm thinking he has a better chance of finding a bank that does not require 6 month seasoning.
yeah, you're right. So a broker works with lots of lenders. Like I work part time for Atlantic Trust Mortgage down here in Florida, so I can do any sort of purchases or refinances here in the state of Florida, and I work with 20 different lenders. That's what makes a broker different than working with directly for a lender. Because when you work directly for a lender, you've got one set of products, and if it doesn't fit, if all those boxes can't be checked, then you got to go elsewhere, or that bank just couldn't do what you're asking them to do. But the reason I ask you, to check in what kind of work your broker does is because if all of their loans go to Fannie and Freddie, then all of them will require the 6 months of seasoning. So you got to be able to find a broker that can think outside the box and maybe has relationships with private lenders.
Mm-hmm. And things are also subject to change. To Will's point earlier about COVID. I mean, that when that happened, a bunch of people changed the regulations. So making sure that you're okay if it's not 6 months is also really important. Thanks for watching that clip. I thought that was a good question. And I think you can ask good questions too. Join us every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live stream Q&A where we answer plenty of questions just like this one. In the meantime, consider subscribing to the channel if you want more of this content. And if you want to increase your deal flow, analyze properties better, and help me feed my family, click the link below for a free 7-day trial of PropStream.